Hello everyone, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, Tu Tien returns to the dying ex-husband who once abandoned her, while Jack waits outside in the rain. Who will she choose? Subscribe so you never miss our next story. Tu Tien was hanging clothes in the yard when an old car stopped outside the gate. Her former mother-in-law stepped out. The woman who had forced Tu Tien to lower her eyes wore no jewelry and carried no commanding voice. She entered the gate, stopped before Tu Tien, and knelt in the dirt. The shirt fell from Tu Tien's hands. Jack emerged from the workshop, but remained beneath the veranda. Mother Loy appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Please save my son," the woman said. Tu Tien's face lost its color. Her former husband was ill, she explained. He refused food and would not enter a hospital. During his fever, he spoke Tu Tien's name. "He wants to see you one final time." Tu Tien stepped backward. She reminded the woman that the same house had pushed her into the rain while her son watched without stopping her. The former mother-in-law lowered her head and offered no defense. She removed an old key and placed it at Tu Tien's feet. Beside it lay a faded handkerchief with Tu Tien's name embroidered in one corner. "He kept this all these years." Tu Tien stared at it, but did not reach down. Jack descended one veranda step. His eyes remained on his wife's trembling hand, not on the kneeling woman. "I no longer belong to that house," Tu Tien said. Her former mother-in-law rose, left the key behind, and turned away. Before entering the car, she looked at Tu Tien. "If he dies tonight, I will never trouble you again." The engine faded along the mountain road. No one spoke. Tu Tien looked at the key below her. Jack looked only at her. The old key remained on the ground until darkness approached. Tu Tien gathered clothes, but her eyes returned to the faded handkerchief. Jack picked up the objects and placed them on the veranda table. He did not ask whether she intended to go. Mother Loy sat beside Tu Tien and asked what her former husband had done to make that house frightening. Tu Tien described the night she was driven away. She waited outside in the rain, hoping he would open the door. Lights burned inside until morning, but the door never moved. "I buried that man in my heart that night." Mother Loy held her hand. "Then do not return because you owe him," she replied. "Return only if your heart needs an ending." Tu Tien asked Jack whether visiting her former husband would make him believe she still loved the man. "It will hurt if you remain there," Jack answered. "But I will not doubt why you walked inside." Tu Tien lowered her face. She did not want to see her former husband, but if he died tonight, the plea at their gate would follow her forever. Jack placed his car key beside the old house key. "I will take you there." Mother Louie asked whether he was pushing his wife toward her past. Jack looked at Tu Tien. Keeping someone by locking every door is not love. Tu Tien lifted the old key. Her hand became steady. "I will go," she said, "but not alone." Jack reached for his coat. Mother Loie watched them leave, then added wood to the stove. Whether they returned together would depend on a door inside another house. Jack drove slowly through the mountain curves. The faded handkerchief lay between them, untouched. Tu Tien tried to speak, but stopped. When the old house appeared beneath a yellow light, her chest tightened. The iron gate made the same sound that had haunted her sleep. Her former mother-in-law waited in the yard. She opened Tu Tien's door, then looked at Jack to see whether he would follow. Jack turned off the engine, but remained beside the gate. "Aren't you coming?" Tu Tien asked. "If I stand in that room, you may say what you think I want to hear," he answered. "I will wait here, so the answer belongs to you." Her former mother-in-law led Tu Tien along the corridor. Everything remained in place. The table where she served meals, the curtain she repaired, and the crack where a thrown bowl shattered. A heavy cough came from the final room. Tu Tien stopped outside the door. Her hand reached the handle but could not turn it. In the yard, Jack saw her shadow through the glass. Instinctively, he moved forward, then stopped himself. Her former mother-in-law whispered that her son had little time left. Tu Tien closed her eyes and remembered Mother Loi's words, "Enter only if her heart needed an ending." She opened the door. The man on the bed turned his head. His sunken eyes widened. Tu Tien, he whispered. The door closed between them. Jack sat on a chair in the yard as rain began dripping from the roof. Every second asked whether trust was courage or merely a slower way of losing her forever. He pulled his coat tighter, watching the lighted window without moving closer. The room smelled of medicine. Tu Tien stayed beside the door, refusing to approach the bed. Her former husband tried to sit up, but coughing folded him forward. Untouched porridge and unopened medicine sat nearby. I knew you would come. Tu Tien answered that she came only to listen. He reached toward her. She pulled a chair beyond his grasp. He apologized for not opening the door years ago. His mother had said Tu Tien would return if ignored long enough. He believed silence could force her to surrender. When he opened the door the next morning, rain had erased her footprints. I thought you would return after several days. Then days became years. Tu Tien asked why he never searched for her. He admitted pride had outweighed longing until illness emptied the house. He pressed the handkerchief against his chest. Stay. I will give you this house. We can begin again. Through the window, Tu Tien saw Jack sitting beneath the rain, facing away from the room. She asked whether her former husband needed her or merely feared dying alone. He fell silent. Tu Tien returned the handkerchief to the table. I can forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean returning. The man gripped his blanket. Then why did you come? Tu Tien looked at the door. So this time, I can choose how to leave. She rose. Her former husband called her name, but she did not turn. As she touched the handle, his voice came from behind her. Jack may love you more than I did, but he does not know what you endured inside this house. Tu Tien suddenly stopped, her hand remaining on the door. Jack does not know everything I endured here, because I never made him pay for another man's mistakes. Her former husband claimed Jack loved her from pity for an abandoned woman. Through the window, Jack remained beneath the porch, his coat wet, his eyes toward the gate. Pity needs someone to remain weak, she answered. Jack gave me the freedom to enter this room, although it hurt him. The man closed his eyes, unable to diminish her choice. Tu Tien returned to the table, poured water, and placed medicine before him. She would call a vehicle to take him to the hospital, but she would not remain as his caretaker. His mother must stop using Tu Tien as the reason he refused treatment. If you want to live, live for yourself, she said. Do not turn death into a rope pulling me back. Her former husband stared at the medicine, then lifted it. He asked whether Tu Tien had ever loved him. She answered yes, adding that because she had loved him, it took years to learn not to return. He swallowed the medicine. When Tu Tien opened the door, her former mother-in-law waited in the corridor. Tu Tien gave her the hospital number and told her to prepare clothes for her son. The woman accepted the paper in silence, crying but no longer kneeling. Tu Tien walked past. Behind her, the man called her name. One final time. She paused. Live. Then she entered the yard. Jack's chair was empty. His coat lay across its back. The car remained outside. Tu Tien called his name. Only the rain answered. Tu Tien ran across the yard and called Jack again. Metal struck roof tiles behind the house. She rounded the wall and found him on a ladder, pulling a tarpaulin across the damaged roof. Rain streamed down his face. Tiles lay beside the sick room window. Tu Tien asked why he was repairing a house belonging to the man who abandoned her. Jack secured the rope and explained that he heard tiles fall and saw water entering the bedroom. The man needed a hospital, but until transportation arrived, the roof needed covering. I am not doing this for him, Jack said. I am doing it so you will not return home believing you abandoned the dying man. Tu Tien steadied the ladder, her tears disappearing into the rain. Jack climbed down and asked whether the conversation was finished. The past is finished, she answered, but your chair was empty. Jack admitted he had been afraid. Every minute behind that closed door made him imagine Tu Tien might stay. He repaired the roof because his hands needed work to stop him from entering and pulling her away. Tu Tien examined the rope marks across his fingers. Trust did not mean feeling no fear, she told him. It meant remaining afraid without stealing another person's choice. Her former mother-in-law called that the hospital vehicle had arrived. Jack lowered the ladder. Tu Tien took his hand before they returned. As the stretcher passed, her former husband noticed their joined hands and closed his eyes. Tu Tien did not release Jack. He did not watch the stretcher leave. He looked only at the woman who had walked out of her past by her own choice. The rain weakened on the journey home. Jack drove while Tu Tien gently rested her hand over his on the gear lever, as though their closed distance might open again. The old key and handkerchief lay on the back seat. Jack asked whether she wanted them. Tu Tien said the handkerchief belonged to a woman who once waited outside in the rain. She would keep it to remember she was no longer that woman. The key would be returned tomorrow. I never need to open that door again. When they reached home, the kitchen light remained on. Mother Loy sat beside a cold meal, a blanket around her shoulders. She did not ask what Tu Tien had told her former husband. She saw their joined hands and added wood to the stove. Jack warmed the food. Tu Tien explained that the sick man had accepted hospital treatment. "And your heart?" Mother Loy asked. Tu Tien watched Jack beside the stove. "I left the past where it belongs." Jack brought 3 bowls to the table and admitted he had feared she would not return. Tu Tien placed their house key in his palm. "I did not return because this door belongs to me," she said. "I returned because the man behind it trusted me enough to wait." Mother Loy pulled their chairs closer. Outside, the rain stopped. Tu Tien folded the handkerchief, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. She hung their key beside the door. The 3 began eating. No one asked about the old house. Beneath the table, Tu Tien quietly reached for Jack's hand. This time, no one needed silence to keep the person they loved.